never thought I'd have a reason to tell this story, but the more I think about it, the creepier it gets. I'm the kind of person who notices everything, probably a little too much, but that's just how I am. I've always been obsessed with keeping things in order. Everything in my house has a place, and it needs to stay exactly where I left it. My place is always spotless, super clean, neat, and organized, to the point where my friends joke about me being uptight. But honestly, it's just how I keep my sanity. So, here's what happened. It was a normal night. I'd been out with friends, got home late, around midnight. The house was quiet, like usual. I locked the door, turned on the lights, and started getting ready for bed. Before that, I went over to my dresser and checked myself in the mirror. I was exhausted, my hair a mess from the night out, and I just wanted to sleep. But then, as I glanced down at my dresser, I noticed something off. A perfume bottle was missing its lid. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous to some, but it's the kind of thing I never forget. I never, ever leave anything out of place, and certainly not a perfume bottle without its lid. I sat there for a moment, staring at it, feeling a strange sense of unease. But I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was just in a rush earlier. The door was locked and everything else seemed fine, so I let it go, thinking I was just tired. I went about my night routine, trying to shake off the weird feeling. I washed up, changed into my pajamas, and sat at my dresser to brush my hair before bed. It's part of my routine, always the same, every night. It was quiet. The house was dead silent, just the hum of the fridge in the background, and I was starting to feel relaxed when I noticed something in the mirror. At first, I didn't really notice, just a flicker of movement in the background, but I thought it was just a shadow. Then I looked again, and that's when I saw it. A man, under my bed. He was huge, lying under the bed, wearing a leather jacket, just staring at me, watching me. My heart dropped, and I felt a cold wave of terror hit me. It was like my body couldn't process what I was seeing. I felt frozen, like I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My whole body went numb as the reality hit. He must have been there the whole time. The perfume bottle missing its lid? That was him, moving around while I was out. I was completely paralyzed by fear, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to keep brushing my hair, pretending everything was fine. My heart was pounding so loud it was all I could hear. I kept staring at his reflection in the mirror, too terrified to turn around and look at him directly, afraid that if he realized I'd seen him, something terrible would happen. Somehow, I managed to stay calm, even though my heart was racing. I kept brushing my hair for a few more seconds, pretending like everything was normal, even though my hands were shaking. Then, I slowly put the brush down and pretended to adjust something on my dresser, anything to keep up the act that I hadn't seen him. My phone was on the nightstand, way too close to the bed. There was no way I was going to risk reaching for it. So, I kept my breathing steady and pretended everything was normal. I walked over to the bedroom door, still acting calm, and as soon as I stepped out, I closed the door behind me as quietly as I could. My hands were shaking as I locked it, trapping him inside. The room didn't have any windows facing the street, so I knew he couldn't escape easily. The second the lock clicked, I sprinted down the hallway, heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my keys, bolted for the front door, and ran to my car. Once I was inside, I locked the doors and finally let myself break down. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911, but I managed to call the cops. I sat there in the dark, staring at the house, terrified that any second I'd see him trying to get out. Luckily, the police arrived quickly. I stayed in my car, heart racing as they stormed the house. They found him still in the room, hiding under the bed, just like I'd left him, probably waiting for me to come back. No forced entry, no broken windows. It turns out he had picked the lock and slipped in without a trace. The fact that he'd been in my house that long without me knowing, that still haunts me. When they pulled him out, I finally got a good look at him. He was huge, much bigger than I'd realized from his reflection. The sight of him standing there, calm and silent, made my stomach drop. There was no way I could have defended myself if he had decided to attack. After everything, I still can't fully wrap my head around how close I came to something awful that night. The police told me I did everything right, that locking him in was the best move I could have made. But the thought that he had been in my house, moving around while I was out with my friends, still sends chills down my spine. I think about that moment, brushing my hair while my hands shook, pretending nothing was wrong, trying to stay calm when every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. I don't know how I kept it together long enough to make it out of there safely. The thought of what could have happened if I hadn't seen him that night still keeps me up sometimes. Not knowing what his true intentions were, that's what haunts me the most. It's terrifying to realize just how vulnerable we are in the one place where we should feel safest, our own homes. It was supposed to be a peaceful getaway, just me and my girlfriend, camping out in the woods to get away from all the noise back home. We hadn't been connecting lately, and I thought maybe some time out in nature would help us clear our heads, maybe work through some stuff. That forest was pretty popular for campers, so we weren't worried about animals or anything like that. But we decided to set up camp in a quiet spot deep in the woods, far from the usual trails, almost uphill, where we wouldn't be disturbed. No cell service, no distractions, just us, a tent, and the sounds of the forest. The first day was great. We set up camp, made a fire, and had one of those quiet, peaceful evenings where you can almost convince yourself everything is going to be okay. The woods were super quiet, but in a way that felt comforting. I don't remember the last time I heard nothing but the sound of wind through the trees and the crackling of a campfire. It was a nice change of pace, a reset we both needed. But that night, things got weird. I woke up sometime after midnight to this soft, scratching noise outside the tent. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but it kept going. Slow and deliberate, as if someone was dragging their fingers along the fabric of the tent. I just lay there, listening, my heart racing. I didn't want to freak my girlfriend out over nothing, so I tried to stay calm. Then I heard it. The zipper. It was moving slow, way too slow, like someone was trying not to make a sound, but couldn't help it. My heart stopped as I realized someone was actually outside, unzipping the tent. I nudged my girlfriend awake, and we both sat there, wide-eyed, trying not to freak out. I reached for the flashlight we kept in the sleeping bag, but didn't turn it on yet. I wanted to be sure. The zipper moved again, just an inch or so. My partner and I exchanged a panicked look, and I finally flicked on the flashlight. "Who's there?" I yelled, way louder than I meant to in the dead quiet of the woods. And then, everything stopped. The zipper didn't move any further. There was this dead silence for a few seconds, and just when I thought maybe I imagined it, I heard footsteps, fast, light footsteps, running away from the tent. My heart was pounding in my ears, but I stayed frozen, listening as the footsteps faded into the distance. After what felt like forever, I finally worked up the courage to unzip the tent and take a look. I poked my head out, flashlight in hand. But when I shined the flashlight around, there was nothing, just darkness. No one was there. The forest around us was completely still, like it had swallowed whatever, or whoever, had been outside just seconds earlier. I decided to step out of the tent, trying to shake off the unease. My girlfriend stayed inside, too freaked out to come with me. I scanned the area, but there was no sign of anyone. No rustling in the trees, no movement at all. Just that same unnerving silence. I stood there for a while, my breaths coming fast, trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, I convinced myself it was probably just an animal. They always said there weren't any dangerous animals in this area, but you could never be so sure out here. We stayed up for a bit after that, both of us way too freaked out to sleep, but eventually, exhaustion took over. The next morning, though, is when things got even weirder. We stepped outside the tent, and the first thing we noticed was that our shoes, which we'd left just outside the flap, were gone. Confused, we started looking around, and then we spotted them, about 20 yards away from the campsite, side by side in the dirt. No drag marks, no footprints. Just our shoes, neatly placed like someone had moved them in the middle of the night while we were inside, totally unaware. That's when the unease really hit us. There's no way an animal would have carried our shoes that far, let alone placed them so neatly and without leaving any footprints or drag marks. Besides, I didn't even believe there were animals around here, and there weren't any signs of anyone else being around. No tracks, no signs of life, nothing. Just us, alone in the woods. We packed up fast after that. All the peace and quiet from the day before was totally gone. It was replaced by this overwhelming feeling that someone had been watching us the whole time, that we weren't alone out there, and that things could have gone way worse. The forest didn't feel calm anymore. It felt like it was hiding something. We barely talked on the hike back to the car, both of us way too freaked out to even process what had happened. To this day, I still don't know who or what was outside our tent that night. But I can tell you one thing. I've never gone camping in the woods again. Whoever or whatever was out was watching us, waiting for the right moment, and I'm glad we got out before it had the chance to do more. My sister and I decided to throw a little party in my apartment one night. Nothing big, just the two of us hanging out in my apartment, blasting music, dancing around, and drinking more than we probably should have. We didn't care about the time or the noise. It was just the two of us, having a good time. The kind of night where you forget about everything and live in the moment. It wasn't like we were disturbing anyone. Or so we thought. We live in a big apartment building, so we didn't think the music would bother anyone. No one ever complained about anything, so we figured we were in the clear. We were having fun, dancing, laughing, the whole deal. The music was blasting, and honestly, we weren't even thinking about how loud it was. And that's when we heard it, a loud, aggressive knock at the door. We stopped and looked at each other, confused. This knock wasn't casual. It was aggressive, like someone was trying to break down the door. My sister rolled her eyes, and I figured it was just some neighbor being overly dramatic. So I went to open the door, not really thinking much of it. And there he was, this guy who lives a few doors down from me. Now, we'd never really talked to him, just passed him in the hall a few times. He was one of those neighbors you avoid without thinking, just gives off a weird vibe. Probably late 40s, but looked older. Always in this dirty old jacket with cold, empty eyes that seemed to size people up without really seeing them. When we opened the door, he didn't say anything at first, just stood there, staring at us with this cold, unsettling look. His eyes moved slowly, looking us up and down. We're both good-looking girls, and we knew it. We got attention sometimes, but this was different. The way he was staring wasn't flattering. It made my skin crawl, like we were being inspected for something far worse. We were in our usual home outfits, just shorts and tank tops, nothing fancy, but it was enough to catch the wrong kind of attention from a guy like him. Finally, he spoke. "Turn it off, now," he said, his face twisted with this creepy expression that only made the tension worse. No please, no explanation, just that cold, flat demand. My sister gave me a look, and I nodded. "Yeah, sure. Sorry," I said quickly, not wanting any drama. He stared at us for another few seconds, like he was trying to decide if we were serious, then he turned and walked away without another word. As soon as the door clicked shut, we looked at each other, confused. My sister shook her head and let out a nervous laugh. "What the hell was that? Dude acts like he owns the place." We shrugged it off, thinking he was just being dramatic or maybe had a few drinks. He seemed off, but we didn't feel threatened, just annoyed. So we cranked the music back up, figuring that would be the end of it. It wasn't until much later that things took a terrifying turn. The music was still blasting, and we were so caught up in the moment that we almost forgot about the creepy neighbor from earlier. I don't remember the exact time. Everything was a blur. But suddenly, there was this violent bang. At first, we didn't know what it was, but then there was another, even harder bang that made the whole door frame shake. My sister and I exchanged a quick look, realizing something was wrong. I rushed to turn the music down, and just as I did, the door flew open. It was him. He had kicked it in. I couldn't believe it. Like, seriously. This guy actually kicked our door down. It felt so unreal, like something you only hear about but never expect to happen to you. There he was, standing in the doorway, his face cold and angry, staring us down. The look in his eyes wasn't just about the noise anymore. It was something way more intense, like he was waiting for an excuse to do this. My heart was pounding, and my sister froze next to me, both of us too shocked to react. He was back. Only this time, he wasn't just asking. Without a word, he walked right into the apartment like he owned the place. His face was stone cold, and he didn't say anything. He just walked over to the speakers, picked one up, and slammed it onto the floor with all his strength. The crash was deafening. My sister let out a small scream, but he didn't stop. He turned to the second speaker, lifted it above his head, and slammed it down just as hard, pieces flying everywhere. The music stopped instantly, and the apartment fell into this creepy, suffocating silence. He turned to us, his eyes dark and dead. "I told you to cut that shit." His voice was low and flat, filled with something much worse than anger. It was like he could do anything, and there wasn't a damn thing we could do to stop him. For a second, he just stood there, towering over us, and I swear, my heart felt like it was about to explode. I didn't know what to say. My sister didn't either. We were just standing there, staring at him, completely frozen. And then, without another word, he turned and walked out, leaving the door hanging wide open, the lock broken, and the shattered speakers lying at our feet. We stood there in the wreckage of our little party, stunned. My heart was still racing, and I couldn't stop staring at the door, half expecting him to come back. I felt sick. The way he just walked in like that, like it was no big deal, like we didn't even matter. It was terrifying. There was something in his eyes, something dark and dangerous, like he could have done a lot worse if he wanted to. We didn't talk much after that. We just sat there, staring at the broken door, still trying to process what had just happened. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily he came in, how helpless we were, just standing there while he destroyed our speakers. We considered calling the police, but in a way, it felt like it was our fault. After all, we were the ones blasting music late at night, so we didn't think they'd take us seriously. What could we even say? That we pissed off the neighbor and he took it too far? It felt like no matter what, we'd be the ones to blame. The next morning, we called the landlord to get the lock fixed. It's scary how fast your space can go from feeling totally safe to completely violated. Some people might hear this and say we deserved it, because we were loud, because we were having fun, that we somehow brought it on ourselves. But it wasn't like that. We didn't deserve to have someone barge into our home, destroy our stuff, and make us feel unsafe.